Hi, Rashonda Cade here, Rashonda's Reading Room. We are reading Hagar's Daughter by Pauline Hopkins. We are on chapter 10, so let's get to it. I don't even know how long it is. It's been kind of a crazy day for me. As you see, I'm someplace different. My office, where I typically do my recordings, is really, really loud when the air conditioning is on, and the air conditioning is on a lot, so I'm trying out different spaces. So this is today's space, and we'll see where I go next time. All right, Chapter 10, The Family of a Millionaire. Senator Zenas Bowen, newly elected senator from California and many times a millionaire, occupied a mansion on 16th Street Northwest in close proximity to the homes of many politicians who have made the city of Washington famous at home and abroad. There were three persons in the Bowen family: the Honorable Zenas Bowen, his wife Estelle, and his daughter Jewel. This was his second season in Washington. The first year was in the House, and his works there was so satisfactory to his constituents that the next season he was elected with a great flourish of trumpets to fill the seat in the Senate, made vacant by a retiring senator. The Honorable Zenas was an example of possibilities of individual expansion under the rule of popular government. Every characteristic of his was of the self made pattern. In familiar conversation with intimate friends, it was his habit to fall into the use of ungrammatical phrases, and in this, one might easily trace the rugged windings of a life of hardship among the great unwashed before success had crowned his labors and steered his bark into its present smooth harbor. That was a lot. Okay, so he is an example of the possibilities of individual expansion under the rule of popular government. So he's a bootstrapper. He pulled himself up by his own bootstraps, or he's living the American dream. No matter how humble your beginnings, you too can be a senator. Every characteristic of his life was of the self made pattern. That's interesting too. And then we find out, but when he's with his family and friends, he falls into the use of ungrammatical phrases. Um, one, don't we all? I know I do. Although I use a lot of grammatical phrases with my family and friends, but that has more to do with who I am than it does with how I feel when I'm around them. So I don't, at first blush, like, okay, he uses ungrammatical phrases with family and friends. But then it says, in this, one might easily trace the rugged windings of a life of hardship among the great unwashed before success had crowned his labors and steered his bark into its present smooth harbor. So he's got some sort of storied past that we don't know about that was rugged, and he was among the great unwashed. Now, the great unwashed could be just anybody at a lower level, it could be immigrants, it could be slaves. I don't know. But success has now crowned his labor, and he's smooth sailing. So what don't people know about Zenas Bowen? And I mean, his name is Zenas. I don't even know what I want to say about that besides the man's name is Zenas. Surely that means something. His name is Zenas. Zenas. All right. So let's keep reading. He possessed a rare nature, one of those genial men whom the West is constantly sending out to enrich society. He had begun life as a mate on a Mississippi steamboat. When the Civil War broke out, he joined the federal forces and at its close was mustered out as Major Bowen. His wife dying about this time, he took his child Jewel and journeyed to California, invested his small savings in mining property in the Black Hills. His profits were fabulous. He counted his pile way up in the millions. Okay, so his wife died and he was a single dad when he moved out to California. Hmm. His appearance was peculiar: middle height, lank, and graceless. Wow. Middle height, lanky, and graceless. He had the hair and skin of an Indian. Oh, okay. I mean, we had said something before about him being dark, but I wasn't thinking. I mean, now, native people, especially today, come in all kinds of complexions, and I guess they probably did then, but What immediately comes to mind is not somebody who's white. When you say he had the hair and skin of an Indian, oh, have you read any of the Outlander books by Diana Gabaldon? I don't know how to say her last name. Gabaldon, I think. Anyway, there's there is a lot of interesting things that happen in those books. I'm enjoying them quite a lot. I'm slogging through one of them right now. There's a character that I haven't learned to love yet, and so when we're following his story, I get disinterested. But anyway, um, just the appearance of what an American Indian looks like it's reminded me of some scenes from Diana Gabaldon's work. Anyway, he had the hair and skin of an Indian, but his eyes were a shrewd and steely gray, wherein one saw the spirit of the man of the world, experienced in business and having that courage, when aroused, which is common to genial men of deadly disposition. Deadly disposition. Firm lips that suggested sternness gave greater character to his face, but his temper was known to be most mild. How does he have a most mild temper and a deadly disposition? Did I read that wrong? I don't think I did. He dressed with scrupulous neatness, generally in black broadcloth. There was no denying his awkwardness. No amount of polish could make him otherwise. His relation to his family was most tender, his wife and daughter literally worshipping the noble soul that dwelt within its ungainly casket. Literally worshiping his noble soul? Okay, I find that concerning. You should not be worshiping your husband or your father. People do, but you shouldn't. And Hopkins just called his body a casket. Can we not skip over that? Literally worshiping the noble soul that dwelt within its ungainly casket. All right, so our bodies from the time of birth until the time of death are consistently dying. We grow, we get old, and we die. But to call the body a casket, I'm not sure what I make of that, but that is striking me as well. Okay, Zenas Bowen, what is really going on with you that your body is housing death and you are a genial man of a deadly disposition? Is that saying his soul is dead? Like what's in like his body is housing if his body is a casket, then what is inside of the body is dead, right? Like that's what happens with caskets. So his wife and daughter literally worship the noble soul that dwelt within its ungainly casket. So can you have a noble soul that's a dead soul? I don't know. I have questions. Let's keep reading. After Fortune had smiled on him, one day while stopping at the Bohemian, a favorite resort in Frisco, he was waited on by a young woman of great beauty. The senator fell in love with her immediately and at the end of the week proposed marriage. Fortunate it was for him that Estelle Marks, as she was called, was an honorable woman who would not betray his confidence. Okay, so he falls in love with the woman who's waiting his table, and women work all the time. Women have worked. Let's not pretend otherwise. But what was the social mindset of women who worked at that time? So she was waiting tables. And fortunate was for him that Estelle Marks, as she was called, like nobody said her name was Estelle Marks. That's just what she was called. So she clearly has secrets of her own, but she was an honorable woman who would not betray his confidence. So she has her own secrets and she's willing to keep his secrets. What are his secrets? Who are you, Zenas Bowen? And who are you, Estelle Marks? All right. Fortunate it was for him that Estelle Marks, as she was called, was an honorable woman who would not betray his confidence. She accepted his offer, vowing he should never have cause to regret his act. One might have thought from her eager acceptance that in it she found escape, liberty, hope. Who are you, Estelle Marks, that you accept A marriage proposal after 1 week to somebody whose confidence you aren't going to betray and in whose marriage proposal you find escape, liberty, and hope. I've got theories. Let us continue. Yes, she said, I will marry you. He was dazed. He cannot speak for one moment, so choked was he with ecstasy at his own good fortune. He covered his eyes with his hand, and then he said in a hoarse voice, I swear to make you happy. My own happiness seems more than I can believe. Then she stooped suddenly and kissed his hand. He asked her where she would like to live. Anywhere you think best, was her reply. He assured her that the North Pole, Egypt, Africa, all were one to him, and with her and let me read that again. He assured her that the North Pole, Egypt, Africa, all were one to him with her and his little daughter, and so they were married. He had never regretted the step. Estelle was a mother to the motherless child, and being a well educated woman, versed in the usages of polite society, despite her recent position as a waitress in a hotel, soon had Jewel at a first class school where she could be fitted for the position that her father's wealth would give her. Nor did Estelle's good work end there. She recognized her husband's sterling worth in business and morals and insisted upon entering the arena of politics. Thanks to her cleverness, he made no mistakes and many hits which no one thought of tracing to his wife's rare talents. It is good to have a wife who can steer you through things if you're Zenas Bowen or if you're other people. It's good to have a spouse who has your back and can help you do things. Um, Not always so good if the spouse doesn't get the recognition the spouse deserves, but let's keep reading. Not that Bowen was a fool, far from it. Mrs. Bowen simply fulfilled woman's mission in making her husband's career successful by the exercise of her own intuitive powers. Mrs. Bowen simply fulfilled woman's mission in making her husband's career successful by the exercise of her own intuitive powers. I'm just going to let that drop right there for a moment. Oh my gosh, it feels like a billion pages until we get chapter 11. All right, I'm on page 82. We got to go to page 89. Oh, I'm kind of tired. I don't know I'm going to get through. I mean, I know I'm supposed to read a whole chapter every time, but I don't know if I'm going to make it through. All right. There are places to stop. Okay, I'm kind of crazy. His public speeches were marked by rugged good sense. His advice was sagacious. He soon had enthusiastic partisans and became at last a powerful leader in the politics of the Pacific Slope. All in all, Mrs. Bowen was a grand woman, and Senator Bowen took great delight in trying to further her plans for a high social position for himself and the child. For himself and the child, not for her. I guess her social position is her husband's social position. And clearly saying the child made me think of Baby Yoda. All right. Jewel Bowen's beauty was of the Saxon type, dazzling fair with creamy roseate skin. Her hair was fair with streaks of copper in it, her eyes gray with thick short lashes, at times iridescent, her nose superbly Grecian, her lips beautifully firm but rather serious than smiling. So she clearly didn't take on her father's coloring. I guess she got his gray eyes. His eyes were gray, right? Yes, his eyes are steely gray, and her eyes are just gray. Her hair has streaks of copper in it. Hmm, okay. Jewel was not unconscious of her attractions. She had been loved, flattered, worshipped for 20 years. She was proud with the pride of conscious worth that demanded homage as a tribute to her beauty, to herself. Okay, so Jewel is 20 years old. And we started this part 20 years later, right? Like at some point there was 20 years later. I'm trying to flip back and see it. Let's find it. Because it was when what's her name? Hagar leaped off of the bridge. Okay, I don't find it. but Hagar leaped off of the bridge with the baby in her arms, and then all of a sudden it was 20 years later. I don't see it anywhere, but okay. So that may or may not mean anything, but something for us to be thinking about. All right. Jewel was not unconscious of her attraction. She had been loved, flattered, worshipped for 20 years. She was proud with the pride of conscious worth that demanded homage as a tribute to her beauty, to herself. Aw, shucks. I mean, maybe I need to live like that. She was proud with the pride of conscious worth that demanded homage as a tribute to her beauty, to herself. Can I demand homage to my beauty? I'm going to go ask my husband. No, I'm not going to ask him. I'm going to demand it. I demand homage and tribute to my beauty. And he'll be like, sure. All right. Her tastes were luxuriously simple. She reveled in the dainty accessories of the toilet. To the outside world, her dress was severely plain, but her dressmaker's bill attested to the cost of her elegant simplicity. It was but a short time since Jewel had been transported from her quiet Canadian convent. Why is she in a Canadian convent? Since Jewel had been transported from her quiet Canadian convent into the whirl of Washington life, a splendid house, more pretty dresses than she could number, a beautiful mother, albeit a stepmother, more indulgent than most mothers, fairly adoring the sweet and graceful girl, so full of youth's alluring charm, and a father who was the noblest, tenderest, and wisest of men. But she was a happy hearted girl, full of the joy of youth and perfect health. She presented a bright image to the eye all through the fall as she galloped over the surrounding country on her thoroughbred mare, followed by her groom and two or three dogs yapping at her heels. There was a perfect accord between her and her stepmother. Mrs. Bowen shared the senator's worship of Jewel. Okay, so Jewel and Mrs. Bowen worship the senator, Zenas, and apparently Zenas and Mrs. Bowen worship Jewel. Does anybody worship Mrs. Bowen? I mean, I'm not saying we should be worshiping people, but if two of the three people in the family are getting worshiped, can we make it 3 out of 3? Let's keep reading. From the moment the two had met and the child had held her little arms toward her, blinking her great gray eyes in the light that had awakened from her slumbers, and had nestled her downy head in her new mother's neck with a sigh of content, almost instantly falling asleep again with the words, "Oh, pity, pity, lady." Estelle Bowen had kissed her passionately again and again, and from that time Jewel had been like her very own. The young stepmother trained the child carefully for 5 years, then very reluctantly sent her to the convent of the Sacred Heart at Montreal, where she had remained until she was 18. Then followed a year abroad and her meeting with Cuthbert Sumner. Have we met Cuthbert Sumner? We've met a lot of people. I don't remember Cuthbert Sumner. I'll keep reading. About the same time, events crowded upon each other in her young life. Her father's rise was rapid in the money world and, together with his political record, gave his family access to the wealthiest and most influential society of the country. Cuthbert Sumner, her acknowledged lover, was an only child of New England ancestry, favored by fortune like herself. His father, a wealthy manufacturer, was the owner of a business that had been in the Sumner family for many generations. His mother had died while he was yet a lad. How come everybody's mom is dying here? Hagar's mom died. Supposedly Hagar's daughter's mother died, but we don't know. Uh, Jewel's mother died. Cuthbert's mother died. Why do we have all of these mothers dying? It strikes me that Harriet Beecher Stowe's mother died. If I'm just thinking about people of the era, I mean, and lots of women died in childbirth, but it is just interesting to me that we have this rash of moms dying. What is up with that? All right, his mother had died while he was yet a lad. It was a dull home. The son, just leaving Harvard, had been expected to assume the responsibilities of his father's establishment, but having no taste for a commercial life and being fitted by nature as well as education for a career in politics, his father reluctantly gave his consent that Cuthbert should have his wish after a few years spent in travel had acquainted him with the great world. Oh, okay, we do know Cuthbert Sumner. Okay, my bad. He's the But oh, the two people were talking about him, but he wasn't one of those two senators. Okay. It is a huge cast of characters, and while I present these weekly, I don't necessarily do the readings weekly. It's actually been maybe a month since I've read this, so I'm trying to get myself back into it. All right. Mr. Sumner Sr., finding his son's desires still unchanged upon his return from abroad, used his influence and obtained for him a position in the Treasury as private secretary in General Benson's department. So young Sumner was duly launched upon the sea of politics. The world of fashion surged about him, and he soon found himself a welcome guest in certain homes. He had little leisure for society, but sought it more after he attained Jewel Bowen's coming out reception a year previous to this chronicle. There had been there he had seen a maiden in white, her arms laden with fragrant flowers, with beautiful, fearless eyes which looked directly into the secret depths of his heart. She pierced his soul with her gray eyes, y'all. And she was what, like 18? Maybe 20, because she spent 2 years abroad. Sumner was 26, and this was not his first experience with women. He had been in love with the sex more or less since the day he left off knee breeches. As he looked into Jewel's eyes, he remembered some of his experiences with a pang of regret. He was no better, no worse than most young fellows. He had played some, flirted some, had even been gloriously hilarious once, for all of which his conscience now whipped him soundly. Jewel looked upon him with mingled feelings, in which curiosity was uppermost. In her world, money was the potent factor, but in this man she saw the result of generations of culture and wealth combined. So now we're talking about old money versus new money. That's intriguing too. One afternoon, when they were calling, about the time of her coming out party, a friend of Mrs. Bowen had mentioned him. Such a fascinating man and so handsome. Will you let me bring him? He's a man you must know, of course, and the sooner the better. We shall be very pleased, Mrs. Bowen replied. Any friend of yours is welcome. Thanks. That's settled then. He looks very different from the most of the men one meets in Washington, remarked Jewel, who was examining the pictured face that smiled at her from its ornate frame on the mantel. How? Oh, I don't know. More manly, I suppose, would explain it. Wait till you know him, returned the matron with a meaning smile. Cuthbert Sumner, Jewel repeated to herself. Yes, they talk so much of him, all the women seem to have lost their hearts to him. I wonder if he will, after all, be worth the knowing. That was the beginning. The end was in sight from the time they first met. It was a desperate case on both sides. None was surprised at the announcement of the engagement the previous winter. It was understood that the wedding would take place at Easter. All right, so there's a break in the book, and I'm kind of tired. I'm thinking all the things about this, so I'm going to stop reading here. That was the first part of chapter 10. We're on page 85. It goes to page 89. It's got one other kind of stopping point, but we'll finish it next time. So we'll finish it this week. And I guess that's everything. Enjoy the reading. I can't wait to see your comments. Talk to you soon.